Oh, hey, what's up, pal? I didn't see you there. You already know who it is. It's the master and ruler of the world, the 6'7", 313 pounds. Brutal Rob Hands. And welcome back to my channel, which is Smells Like a Story Time, man. Where I tell the stories, I give my experiences of what it was like in the 10 years that I spent in the Northern California professional wrestling scene. Excuse me. So in the last couple of videos, I've talked about the first ever independent pro wrestling show I attended, which gave me the inspiration to sign up for the APW boot camp. I told the story about signing up for the boot camp, meeting Roland Alexander. Told a little bit about the first show that I attended as a signed up member of the APW boot camp. I got to do the regular stuff that night after watching the show. I got to vacuum up the locker room areas and all that good stuff. Learned about the chores. So tonight, excuse me. I'm trying to build my appetite for my DiGiorno's later. It's cheat day, pal. But tonight, what I'm going to talk about is the first show that I was at that I was not on the other side of the barricade, which guess doesn't really make any sense because APW didn't have barricades, but at least in the garage, the old school APW garage, they didn't have barricades. So when I talk about being on the other side of the barricade, what I mean is, as you all know, I'm a big wrestling fan. I was a card-carrying member of the WWE Universe. So really, as I started getting older and older, me mainly like 15, 16, 17, even until my 20s before I signed up, I would go to shows, whether they'd be a live Raw, SmackDown taping, house shows. Where I lived at the time, actually, I shouldn't say lived at the time because I live in the same area now, but the area that I lived in when I was a child, the area that I still live in now, we are about an hour and a half drive from the old Arco Arena in Sacramento, so we would get a lot of, anytime WWE would come to town, I'd always get tickets to a show because it's only an hour and a half drive, you know, over to Sac from where we are. 420 break. So as I started going to these shows, I started looking at things more, looking at the shows more of just the wrestling action. I was really intrigued of like everything that was going on, the production, everything from the production to the announcers to what the wrestlers were doing, the stuff that would happen in between the matches, the cleaning of the pads, the wiping down the ropes. And I would sit there and I'm like, man, like there's so much going on. How cool would it be to be on the other side of the barricade in any way, shape, or form, whether I'm catering or I'm a ring crew, I'm whatever, you know, whatever you're doing, that you're part of this show. Obviously, 16 years old, 17 years old, I'm like, can't be a wrestler, you know, obviously. Didn't even know where to start. But I always wanted to be, every time I'd go to a show, I'd have fun, and I'd have fun at these live events, or these Raws, or these SmackDowns that I would go to, but I'm like, man, I just want to have some sort of role on the other side of that curtain, or on the other side of that barricade, just seeing all what's going on, like, how cool that is to, like, to be a part of all of this that's going on, not just the fan, you know, not just the I don't know, I'd always feel like I was so into wrestling and I'd go to these shows and I wanted to be involved more in wrestling And I go to these big productions and be a fan and be like, I feel like a little kid watching the adults work. So September 10th, 2010. No, yeah, it was 2010. September 10th, 2010. I get up in the morning. I put on my black APW. Jody Christopherson was here. T-shirt. Throw on a black pair of pants. Leave my house in Clear Lake. Hop in the Impala, and I drive down to Hayward. Show up maybe about 1 o'clock or so. Like, hey, I help out a little bit, this and that, and they're like, hey, you're gonna do security tonight. Whoa. So, as a security guard at the APW shows, you would be positioned in a couple different areas. You usually have one security guard over by the entranceway, maybe one or two by the entranceway where Roland would sit, and that wasn't really the action spot, so maybe the student who wasn't going to be involved in a lot of the action would kind of be in that area. Same with on the other side, you had you have like a security guard on the on one side of the ring, which was kind of cluttered because the ring steps were there. It was very narrow, and that's where the cameramen would be. On the other side of the ring was the two rows of fans, so we didn't have any security guards there. And then there was a spot which was called the War Zone, which that was the largest part of the garage area, and you could like get 3 or 4 rows of seats next to the ring, and then they pop up the garage door open, and you can get more and more seats, out. Like, normally they'd put up a bleacher. They would put up trying to think like a riser, like a like you see at the high schools or something like that. They put one of those up against the open garage door, put a tarp up, and damn, you got a whole little section right there. Now, since that's where most of the space was, that's where a lot of the high spots took place in. The dives, the brawling on the outside, etc., etc. So that's where the most of the security was, because if the guys are going to do dive outs and the guys are going to go to the outside, our job was to move the fans away so they could, the wrestlers could safely do what they needed to do while the fans could safely spectate and not get in the way. So I'm pumped. I mean, all I did the whole night was this and a little bit of that and maybe a little bit of this and a little bit of that and maybe some of this and some of that. But I was jazzed, man. I'm on the other side of the barricade. I'm part of this production. And a little added bonus, the spot that I did security in was the hard camera side. And at the time, APW was on local access television. So call me a mark, call me whatever you want. I was a mark, man. I'm still a mark for wrestling today. We're all marks, We're all marks. Like, I got a t-shirt of nails hanging up on the wall right here. Like, we're all marks. But yeah, man, I was marking out hard for being security. And then I got to go home. And then on Saturday afternoon, I'd turn on the local access station at 3 o'clock. And I watched the 1 hour long Gym Wars episode, and sure enough, I'd see my little ass back there on television. And yeah, man, when you're just a super mark who's just getting their feet wet in the business, and like you're seeing yourself on local access television, standing there like this with the APW shirt on, doing security, you're marking out hard for that. And you're just thinking, man, I can't wait till I rise up, and then I'm wrestling in the ring. I'm not standing on the side of the ring on television. I'm wrestling in the ring on local access television. So, talk a little bit about the fun stuff that would go around doing security. And they used to switch us out for matches because they used to have us. They would have some of us stand outside to where the wrestlers would be back calling their matches and whatnot. We would stand and the little side area to where like sometimes fans would be looking for the bathroom and or you know, and we'd have to, hey, no, you know, you can't come back here, etc., etc. Um, but when you're actually working the security inside the building, especially when you're working, um, when you're working in um, the war zone area, you have to really be aware of what's going on because you need to, man, go to the traps. Go to the traps. I have 3 traps set up in this house. Go to the traps. Sorry about that. I just found an ant. Found an ant walking on my table right here. And I got 1 trap outside. I got 1 trap in my living room. And I just, after vacuuming tonight, I put a trap in my room. I still don't have any ants in these traps, but I just found one right here. So that's why I had to yell at it and tell it, go to the trap. Even though it ain't going to the trap because it's dead on my finger right now. Well, it was dead on my finger. I think you know what I did. I killed an ant. Because I'm a giant. I'm a 6'7" giant that kills ants. Alright, back to the story. Or back to explaining. Now you're dead and stoned, you stupid ant. You gotta be aware. You have to, you're going to be a good security guard in the war zone. You have to be proactive instead of reactive. You can't react and wait for the guys to go to the outside before you react to moving the fans out of the way, because there's a chance somebody could get hurt, whether it's a wrestler or a fan itself. So you got to be aware. Like, you see these guys working, see a guy go over the top rope and he's on the ring apron and they're going back and forth. Hey, something might happen here. You gotta, it looks like they're going to the outside, so you gotta move them out of the way. And a lot of times, and I don't know if the boys would do this to fuck with us, and in fact, if anybody who's worked any of those APW shows in the garage back in the day, comment down below or comment on my Facebook, and let me know, did you guys purposely used to fuck with the students to make it? Because I would swear, I would watch some matches sometimes where it seems like y'all teased going to the outside like 5 or 6 times in a minute. And within that minute, 5 or 6 times we had to shuffle, moving the fans around. But that's what I said. You got to be proactive instead of reactive. If it looks like the boys are going to the outside in any way, shape, or form, you need to react and clear that space on the outside, regardless of whether they go to the outside or not. And there is times you could tell, like, guy gets knocked to the floor, and his opponent's in the ring doing that. You know what's coming. A dive is coming. So that was fun. It was, not only did you get to be part of the show, you got to be on camera. You got to stand there in all black with a cool APW shirt, so people knew you weren't just a fan. They knew you were part of this whole production. And then you had to be on your toes. You were actually doing something. You were clearing room for the wrestlers to work on the floor. You were clearing room so the fans could safely watch the wrestlers work on the floor without getting clobbered. And these were close quarters. It was tight. It was tight in the war zone. Anybody that's been to the old APW garage knows how tiny and how tight quarters that was. Then afterwards, you do the security for the night. Afterwards, the show ends. You got to put all the chairs away, mop up the floor, mop up the floor in the ring area, go in the back, vacuum up, clean the bathrooms. Now, granted, one person didn't do all this. We'd all have chores spread out between the various students. But it was a really good learning experience. You're learning how to pay your dues which is a very important part of being a wrestler in any level. Whether you just want to be a guy that wrestles on the indies on the weekends, and that's what you do. You go and you work your 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, and you go and you wrestle. You wrestle Saturday and Sunday nights. Like, you still need to pay your dues to get there. You go to a big independent, a GCW. I would say ROH, but I guess they're shut down now. Anything like that, you're gonna pay. You're gonna want to, no matter how long you've been wrestling for, you get a shot at. You're gonna want to walk in. You're gonna want to be humble. Hey, is there anything I can help you guys? Especially if you're not booked. If you're just going there to show up and show face, you always, hey, anything I can help you guys out with. I'm able to do this. I'm able to do that. That was one thing. I'd never really mastered as a pro wrestler or as being in the pro wrestling business. That was definitely one of my mistakes. One of the many mistakes we will talk about on this channel in my videos. One of my first mistakes was not making myself a multi-use tool. In fact, like I said, I'm not trying to have any regrets or any woe is me or anything like that. These are just me being honest and talking about my mistakes and my choices. Had I been more of a multi-purpose tool, I might still have more of a role in wrestling today than smoking bong loads and talking into a camera about my experiences. And what I mean by being a multi-purpose tool was I was focused on being a wrestler. And I wasn't even doing the stuff that I needed to do to be successful at that correctly. Like, I showed up to train. I went and did ring crew and paid my dues. I showed up to training, but man, I was never in the gym. I wasn't dieting. I was drinking, smoking, and doing blow. So not only was I not putting the effort into being the best wrestler I could be, the best wrestling student I could be, I wasn't watching. I wasn't studying tape, any of that stuff. I was just showing up, just showing up to practice. Also, I didn't make myself a multi-purpose tool to where I didn't learn different skills. Like, I didn't learn how to how to do cameras. I didn't learn how to do, I didn't learn how to work a camera. I didn't learn how to work the spotlight. I didn't learn how, all the different things you can do. An assistant to the production, all the different things you can do in wrestling to make yourself an asset to any promotion, and not just in one way. This promotion brings you in not just because you're a wrestler, but man, you you could referee. You could wrestle under a mask, and then we could throw you out there to referee. Then you could run a hard camera from the back of the building or whatever. Just being a multi-purpose tool and learning different skills in the wrestling business. Not doing that was one of my biggest mistakes. So now I definitely had a chance to do that, and because I didn't sign up for, or I didn't start training in the boot camp till January, and this first show that I worked security at was in September, before that January. So I had 4 or 5 months to learn different things before I even started training. I could have learned how to use a camera, how to use a spotlight. So by the time that I had completed my Hell Week with the APW boot camp, I had started my training. Everybody knew of me already. Like, hey, no, like, he's new, but he's been around for the last several months and helping out. And I was doing that, but I was a lot of the people that I met in my first night at the boot camp, I had met for the first time. And I had been coming to every APW show from August to that January, leading up to me starting with the boot camp. So I was doing that, but I wasn't doing it to my best abilities. which, you know, kind of was just kind of a par for the course for my whole wrestling career. Was I was doing things, but I wasn't doing them to my best abilities, and that was my own fault. And by the time I actually started to kind of take things serious, it was almost a little bit too late. Maybe it might not be. Who knows? We'll see. Um, but yeah, that's how it was. That was my first. That was the first wrestling show I was at where I was not a fan. I was actually a part of the whole production. I was a security guard. I was one of the smallest parts of the production. I had to wait several years to grow into a big 313-pound part of the production. But I was a small part of the production. I was on the other side of the barricade, and I drove the 3 hours that night from Hayward back to my place in Clear Lake at the time, and I was jazzed. And really, I was jazzed. I think that was the first night, too, that I also went out to dinner with everybody at Nick's Restaurant, which was Roland's favorite restaurant, which I don't understand why. The food wasn't that great. The service was horrible because the staff hated us. The staff knew we'd come in once a month. 14, 15 of us would come in at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, once a month, and they hated us. So I don't know why Roland loved that place so much, because like I said, food was horrible, service was horrible, in a shitty part of San Leandro, or even San Lorenzo, I don't know. I don't know why Roland liked it so much, but that was Roland's spot, and that's where we went. So, you know, after each one of these shows, the August one, I was jazzed because I was signed up, and, like, I just had no idea where this was going to go. The September show, I got to be security, and first time on the other side of the barricade, even though there was no barricades. That's why I threw the quotations up there. The October show was Halloween Havoc. That show I had done before that show, I had dieted every day between the September show and Halloween Havoc. So I came into the Halloween Havoc and came to that show in the best shape I had ever felt. I'd lost a bunch of weight, and it was just like, man, I was starting my yo-yo. Where, you know, like, where's my yo-yo? Let me see my yo-yo. But, you know, I started, that's when, between the September and the October shows, when I started my yo-yo dieting, which actually September to October was really solid. Then October to November, it started yo-yoing. And then come September, after I turned 21, I started, and I really started to, I could go and buy beer legally. I was already drinking, but now I could go buy this stuff legally. I was still working out, but my dieting was yo-yo, yo-yo, yo-yo. We'll talk about that a little more next week, because next week we're going to be talking about Hell Week. And what in the Hell Week did I get myself into? That's what we'll be talking about next week. But talking about getting jazzed. So like Halloween Havoc, that was the biggest show. I'm in great shape. Went out to dinner with everybody afterwards that night, which was great because I've been dieting. Literally starving myself and working out for the last month. And so I remember that night. It was a great show. I mean, I was so young in my experience and being in the wrestling business that every show was a great show to me, just because I was so excited to be a part of it. And but I remember specifically I got like a grilled cheeseburger and a plate of biscuits and gravy. And it was like, I remember everyone at the table looking at me too, like kind of like, wrestler food, huh? You know, they were like egg whites and chicken breasts, you know. And I'm like, no, it's my cheat night tonight. That's, you know, that's why I'm having all of this. Which it was true. I had dieted all for that whole month, but then it started yo-yoing. Anyways, we'll get more into that in the next week. We're going to talk about Hell Week. We'll talk about how I'd started to work out after I'd signed up my first trip back to the gym or my first time in a gym ever, I think, actually. My first time in an actual gym. And then trying to figure out this whole dieting thing. And then Hell Week, and how as much as I had no idea what I was doing with working out and dieting, how much at least starting to do that helped me get through Hell Week. As far as still trying to get through how these shows were getting me jazzed. I remember the November show wasn't... I had a lot going on that night. I had a lot going on the time of the November show. I had had a Friday where the night before I had done way too much blow. And if you go ahead and do way too much blow, and then like you start dry, sometimes you start nodding off. And I had nodded off and ended up hitting the trash can and tearing the side mirror off of my Impala. So I remember the November show, I had to take my mom's Trailblazer, which we'll get into the Trailblazer later in other episodes. I had to take that Trailblazer down to the APW show. And I just remember the November show wasn't as big for me as the last couple of ones. But then Christmas Chaos came. Not only was my pops at that show, he was there watching the show. My dad always, whenever he could, he would come and watch the wrestling shows I was at, whether I was just at there as security or later on he'd come and watch me. And I got to see my first and take part in my first ever stretcher angle. Matthew Theall got turned on by his client, the Mountain from Stone Mountain, the 400-pound Larry Blackwell. Larry gave him a bunch of splashes, and it was our jobs to get Matthew on the stretcher and wheel him out. And since we're all just a bunch of green beans who have no fucking idea what we're doing, we almost dumped Matthew Theall straight into my pop's lap while trying to carry him on the stretcher. I was also extremely high on ecstasy that night, too. So not only am I taking part in the stretcher angle, I'm seeing this heel turn. This was like a very serious... This was an episode of Gym Wars that had a very, like it was a very serious episode. Like, this was a very serious show. Like, a lot was going on. Like, heel turns, stretcher angles, and, man, I'm on ecstasy, and I'm just like, man, this is awesome. My eyes are like this, and I was just like, man, this is awesome. So I was especially jazzed after that, and this was going to be my last show before the next APW Gym Wars that was going to happen. I will have already started my training at the boot camp. And that's what we're going to get into next week. Like I said, we're going to talk about how I walked into a gym for the first time in my life at 20 years old. How I started actually trying to diet for the first time in my life at 20 years old. And Hell Week. What in the hell week did I get myself into? But anyways, this has been Brutal Rob Hands. This has been It Smells Like a Story Time, man. And thank you for everybody who decided to take 30 minutes out of their Sunday night and spend it with the big, bad, broody man. And I'll see you guys in the next video.